Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. Time for us to get going once again. And, red lights going on. No, nothing wrong. Just as it turns out, a particularly bright red pop-up ad in one of the many screens that I have open. But it started to look like it was some sort of, I don't know. I guess the weather alert is what I might have thought it might be. Which, how much is that going to affect what's going on here? Although, apparently some winter tornadoes popping up across the south. So, none here, thankfully, but I did happen to see it in the news. And a few other things happened in the news as well. And maybe we'll check in on a couple of those things, because some of them, might be important, might help shape the future of news here in the country, at least for the next, 15 minutes or so. That's how long news tends to last. This morning, I think we'll probably spend some time Googling to find out whether or not Kristi Noem is still the Secretary of Homeland Security. She's on the bubble. The big news, I guess, out of the immigration situation and the ongoing insanity in Minneapolis is perhaps it is coming to a close, and as it seems to be the news, there's some dispute about this, but Greg Bovino, tiny little Greg Bovino, appears to be on the outs, at least with respect to his on-the-ground command in Minneapolis at the moment. Though I think what we've settled on, and this was reported last night, and immediately disputed by actually one of the worst spokespersons the administration has, Tricia McLaughlin, one of the most venal liars they've got. And I mean, this is a gang headed by Caroline Levitt, but I mean, McLaughlin's really horrific in the depth and scope and insanity of her lies. But anyway, once it was reported that Bovino would be leaving Minneapolis, and it wasn't quite clear whether he would be leaving and be fired, or leaving and be reassigned elsewhere, or he was just moving the road show to somewhere else, possibly Philadelphia. Wasn't clear. But then the news became, well, he's not going to be the commander at large, the sort of fake made-up title that they gave him to allow him to roam the country and lead on-the-ground assault and, well, now murder gangs all over in different cities, and that he could go pretty much wherever he wanted because he was a commander at large. And apparently now he's being sent back to base, I guess, whatever that might be, and perhaps reined in. And yesterday we got news, I don't know, we think we discussed it for very long. Trump, in one or another, or maybe even several of his weirdo rants on his private social media platform, announced that he would be sending Tom Holman to Minneapolis to, I guess, this is his idea of straightening things out. And I mean, he personally beats up fewer people than Greg Bovino does, but he's really no great shakes when it comes to acting as a department head or spokesperson. But apparently he's to be dispatched there. And both Bovino and Kristi Noem, I guess, are being set up to take all the blame for all of it. And that's not a bad place to start, but not by any means a solution to the problem, because there are 800,000 weirdo goons out there who I don't know if they really care for Bovino personally or not, or Kristi Noem personally or not, and they're pretty much happy to take their orders from wherever they can get them, so long as the orders are go beat people up. They'll be happy. Anyway, so Greg Bovino on his way out, and we have to thank Scott for bringing us this special addition to the show. Thank you, Scott. Scott, we're a little happier about it than that would make out. But we mentioned that it would be fun to have a certain thing, and I can't wait to play it for Greg, but this will now be wherever Bovino pops up next, and hopefully we're not too late. I don't know. I mean, I hope he just stays bottled up somewhere and we never see him again, but would be a shame to waste good music for it. So tiny Greg Bovino arriving on the scene somewhere after having been kicked out of the Home 2 suites in the suburbs of Minneapolis and on his way back to wherever it is he has his desk. We have, of course, the tiny Greg Bovino march. You get the idea. It's tiny and tinny as well. It's not faster, it's just higher pitched is all. And so, Greg Bovino, good luck in your next posting, by which I mean break a leg. You know, usually it goes the other way around, right? Break a leg, by which I mean good luck. No, not really good luck. Actually, break a leg. That would be fine with me. You know, it's we don't wish evil on you, but we maybe a little bit. And it's always a little bit. All sorts of great jokes coming out of it, by the way. His assignment cut short, hardy har. But people are mad with Bovino, and it's probably best for his own safety that he get the hell out of there and probably not show up in Philadelphia. Okay, so we have that news. I am going to have to probably, during one of the breaks, Google to see whether Kristi Noem is still in office or not. I haven't seen any breaking news to that effect so far. But it could happen at any time. Let's see. Oh, also, hat tip to Michael Evans. Michael Evans who is Columbia, like the country. Columbia Docs, DOCS, like documents. Editorial director at National Security Archive. And a FOIA enthusiast. And a Columbia specialist. And in his off hours, I guess, maybe professionally, a bluegrass guitarist as well, thanks to his bio. Anyway, on Blue Sky Columbia Docs, Michael Evans bravely, I guess, tweets out his take on what's happening here. Bovino shows Holman how he gets results in Minneapolis. And it is, do you remember the Bugs Bunny gangsters? It was a Muggsy. And maybe he was a little tiny guy with a huge hat, the gangster boss, and he had a big, dumb, bald oaf sidekick, bodyguard, what have you, and, well, that's actually kind of what they look like. So I thought that was funny, and I shared it with everybody, and you can have a look at it and decide what the hell you're going to do with it for the rest of the day. Much else happening, a lot of it breaking as we speak on Blue Sky, the network of choice for me at the moment. Some more activity in the Minneapolis courts where Chief of the District of Minnesota, Patrick Schiltz, although the temptation to call him Schiltz is just too much, and sometimes it's just a mistake. But I think I saw earlier Kyle Cheney pointing out that he's put out yet another letter, although this time from the office. He's handling a lot of cases that stem from this, I don't know what you would call it, whatever their operation name is for occupying Minnesota. But lots of habeas petitions from detained immigrants and sometimes detained non-immigrants as well. Just pretty much whoever they felt like walking around and detaining. But at this point, he's issued a number of these habeas petitions, and what do you know, the people are not being produced in court and not being released. So it's causing a big problem. Let's see if I can find Kyle's feed. There it is. And I noticed this was up at the top and being passed around just earlier. Minnesota's top federal judge says that ICE has been violating court orders repeatedly, and they have, for instance, in detaining non-citizens or rushing them to Texas despite judges' commands. And here's the upshot of it. There's a nice letter outlining all of the different kinds of ignoring of court orders that he's talking about, and says, all right, well, we've had enough of this. It's time now for a high-level government official to appear personally in court at a show cause hearing, to show cause why he should not be held in contempt of court. And I don't know, punished accordingly. This is in the case, as it happens, of one particular petitioner, Juan T.R. Juan T.R.'s habeas petition. And just one of many examples. It just happens to be one that the clock has run out on, where Juan was he petitioned the court on January 14th for a habeas corpus petition, and was granted. It was ordered, and the order was, among other things, as the judge writes, that respondents provide petitioner a bond hearing under 8 U.S. Code Section 1226A within 7 days of the date of this order. And if respondents do not provide petitioner with a bond hearing under that section within 7 days, then petitioner must immediately be released from detention. And guess what happened? No hearing. And also no release. And as the judge points out, this is one of dozens of court orders in which the respondents, and that's here, the Kristi Noem as Secretary of Homeland Security, the department itself, Todd Lyons, who is the acting director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that's ICE, appropriately named Lyons, like Caroline Levitt, I guess. Also, David Easterwood, who is the acting director of the St. Paul Field Office of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And by the way, if I recall correctly from our discussion last week, Friday, David Easterwood, the acting director, is the pastor at the city's church where the protests were going on. And guess what? That's yet another case in which Easterwood's name is before Judge Schiltz here. Well, anyway, Todd Lyons is the target of this one, and Judge Schiltz writes, this is one of dozens of court orders which the respondents have failed to comply with in recent weeks. He writes it correctly, with which respondents, yes. The practical consequence of respondents' failure to comply has almost always been significant hardship to aliens, many of whom have lawfully lived and worked in the United States for years and done absolutely nothing wrong. The detention of an alien is extended, or an alien who should remain in Minnesota is flown to Texas, or an alien who's been flown to Texas is released there in Texas and told to figure out a way to get home on your own. Right? The court has been extremely patient with respondents, even though the respondents have decided to send thousands of agents to Minnesota to detain aliens without making any provision for dealing with the hundreds of habeas petitions and other lawsuits that were sure to result. Respondents have continually assured the court that they recognize their obligation to comply with court orders and that they've taken steps to ensure that those orders will be honored going forward. Unfortunately, the violations continue. And no one's really terribly surprised by that, but it is happening. Let's see. The court's patience, he lets them know, is now at an end. Accordingly, the court will order Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE, I didn't realize he, too, was an acting director, to appear personally, and that is, of course, in italics, appear personally before the court and show cause why he should not be held in contempt of court. The court acknowledges that ordering the head of a federal agency to potentially appear is an extraordinary step, but the extent of ICE's violation of court orders is likewise extraordinary, and lesser measures have been tried and failed. So there it is. The order, based on the foregoing and all of the files, records, and proceedings herein, is hereby ordered that 1. The court will hold a hearing on, mark your calendar, this Friday, January 30th, 2026 at 1 p.m., too late for the show, in courtroom 15 in Minneapolis before Judge Patrick J. Schiltz. Respondent Todd Lyons must appear in person to show cause why he should not be held in contempt for violating the court's January 14th, 2026 order. So if he can't show it, well, that's the end of it. I guess you're in contempt. The question is, I guess the judge at that point could decide, well, maybe you're not really in contempt, but you're really close. And, of course, even if he decides that he's in contempt, it could be, well, I'm going to fine the agency. I'm not certain what the remedy ends up being. I doubt that we're talking about civil contempt where we'll imprison, Lyons, until such time as the department, such time as ICE begins complying with court orders. But that is the upshot of what can happen with a normal defendant in a situation like this. What else happens? He has to show up in person. Petitioner's counsel may, of course, participate in the hearing, but his attendance is not required. And fourth, if before the hearing the parties file a stipulation indicating the petitioner has been released from custody, 1TR, right, the court will cancel the hearing and will not require Lyons to appear. So there is an out here, which I know some people say, well, of course they'll take the out and then he won't have to show up and then we won't get our justice. But, if the guy gets out, fine, good. I'm glad about that. Even though, obviously, it took a lot more warning than you should have to give for compliance with a federal court order. I mean, come on. It's a federal court order, for God's sake. All right. But Judge Patrick Schiltz clearly losing his patience on a number of fronts. And they're all coming before him. Some of them are before him personally, and then, of course, as chief judge of the District of Minnesota, he's hearing from all the other federal district judges on that bench. And, of course, as we heard yesterday, is in contact with the next level up in the 8th Circuit as well. So, they're getting annoyed there on the bench. We'll see, how effectively they can turn this into action from the federal government. All right, a couple of other things here. Let's dive back into, looks like I tried to put something aside via Blue Sky yesterday, and it must have, I guess I wasn't on the page I wanted to be, and I ended up saving something different. So we'll get rid of that one, because that won't help us at all. And bounce back into Instapaper and see what else we have put aside. Yes. This is an interesting development, I guess. Will probably turn up in court documents at some point, and maybe in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, if there ever is one. This I saw pointed out by, I'm sure Brandon Friedman, I think, brought it to my attention, but an article from the Colorado Sun, and I don't know if let's see if we can open the browser. Yeah, I guess I recognize that logo. We may or may not have been on their page before, but Jennifer Brown writes this story. Just another level of intentional badness, like daring to be hauled into the International Court of Justice here for ICE. And I didn't realize that this had racist overtones. I guess I'm just not operating in this realm, but racist Ace of Spades cards. It's easy enough to see why it would land in racist land. But racist Ace of Spades cards left behind following ICE arrests in Eagle County, Colorado, one nonprofit says. And not only are they racist, but they have a history in, I don't know what you would call it, I guess almost like colonialist violence, I suppose. And they have a history from Vietnam days, apparently, which, let's read on in the Colorado Sun and let them explain. ICE said it began an investigation, into the allegations, and that it, quote, unequivocally condemns any such actions. And you know how valuable that unequivocal condemnation from ICE is. A Colorado nonprofit that helps immigrants in mountain towns says that after several men were detained by ICE during, quote, fake traffic stops, that's interesting, this week in Eagle County, and this was, I suppose, last week, written on the 23rd, this article was. So, ominous Ace of Spades cards were left behind in their empty vehicles, right? We heard all about the ghost cars essentially being left around Minneapolis as they just snatched people out of their cars and left them there, abandoned with the doors open. Now, as spooky as that is, they decided, let's be really melodramatic about it and leave these Ace of Spades calling cards. Where do you get a whole deck of just Ace of Spades? I don't know, but apparently they've found them. Or they're just ruining lots of decks of cards. Family and friends who went to retrieve the vehicles left abandoned on Highway 6 found the cards, which were printed with contact information for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Detention Center in Aurora. So they had these specially printed with your money I guess. The Ace of Spades cards, which have been used by white supremacist groups as a racist symbol and were called death cards by some during the Vietnam War, were found in at least 2 vehicles after those vehicles were pulled over by ICE agents, according to Voces Unidas, a nonprofit based in Glenwood Springs. 9 people were taken into ICE custody during the targeted action on Wednesday, I guess of last week, because it ain't Wednesday yet, including 8 people taken after 4 traffic stops and 1 person who was walking to a bus stop in Avon, said Alex Sanchez, president and CEO of Voces Unidas. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security said via email Friday that ICE is investigating the situation and unequivocally condemns this type of action and or officer conduct. Like they don't even know what it is. All right. Send them the boilerplate unequivocal condemnation letter. Once notified, ICE supervisors acted swiftly. They were acting swiftly. They did act swiftly, he says, to address the issue, like high-fiving them, probably. Homeland Security officials wrote, the ICE Office of Professional Responsibility will conduct a thorough investigation and will take appropriate and swift action. There's a picture of the card here embedded in them. Looks like an Ace of Spades card, just like you would see. A very ornately decorated giant spade in the middle. But up top, where it might otherwise say ace, if sometimes some cards don't actually do it, but instead of ace, it says ICE. ICE Denver Field Office. And then there's the address. And if you want to go protest, I suppose, it's 3130 North Oakland Street in Aurora, Colorado. And they helpfully provide the zip code in case you want to, I don't know what, send gifts from Amazon, I guess. Drop ship your gas masks to the area. You can go online and find an Amazon box in the neighborhood and send a gas mask to yourself. Anyway, that's actually a good idea. And the 9 people were taken to the ICE detention center in Aurora, said Sanchez, and Voces Unidas is funding their legal representation. Good for them. The vehicles were left abandoned after the traffic stop, and family members and friends who went to retrieve them found these stupid Ace of Spades cards. In other words, calling cards. Your relative has been disappeared by these folks, and you can find us here, although maybe you can't find us. The families were asking questions about what this means. Is this a business card? He said. What we know is that this is a racist symbol. It comes from an evil place. ICE agents in unmarked vehicles with attached sirens pulled over 3 vehicles Wednesday morning along Highway 6 near the Minturn exit. Is that right? Minturn? Okay. A 4th traffic stop occurred near Route 6, the Route 6 Cafe in Eagle Vale. Eagle and Vale, both, actually. Eagle-Vale. All right. When you are followed and sirens are going off, it feels and looks and resembles local police, Sanchez said. Every single time we speak to someone, they say it looked like a police officer. We stopped because we thought we were compelled by law. In other words, law-abiding citizens. Although, I guess in this case, probably not citizens, and that's where the problem arises as far as ICE is concerned. Not only are they brown, they're not citizens. Anyway, this is done to trick people to believe they are local police officers. Got to watch out for that. And also it's unfair, and you got to stop it. Someone should be in court about it. And I guess Voces Unidas will be. If they knew it was a federal government which does not have jurisdiction over state traffic laws, they would not stop. Voces Unidas has documented 120 detentions in western Colorado since January 2025, including in Eagle, Steamboat Springs, Glenwood Springs, Frisco, and Grand Junction. 2 to 5 detentions per week are typical, and occasionally 9 or 10, the organization said. About half the detentions have occurred during traffic stops, while others happened at homes, job sites, and in or outside jails, according to the nonprofit. This week, using eyewitness accounts, videos, and photos, Voces Unidas confirmed 10 ICE vehicles, conducting targeted arrests in Summit, Eagle, and Garfield counties. The agents appeared to be looking for specific people, not conducting raids, Sanchez said. Attorneys are still looking into the cases of those detained Wednesday, and Sanchez said he did not know whether any of the 9 men had criminal charges, or even criminal records, probably. Of the 9 men, 1 was from Mexico, and the rest were from Central and South America, including Honduras, Nicaragua, and Peru. The cards included the words Denver Field Office and had the address and phone number for the ICE Detention Center in Aurora. Homeland Security officials said in their email to the Sun that its officers are held to the highest standard under President Trump and maybe still Secretary Noem. ICE is held to the highest professional standard, they wrote, as our brave law enforcement officers. I don't know who they're talking about there. They're not brave and they're not law enforcement officers. And I think I did see somewhere on Blue Sky someone say that Jake Tapper found himself referring to them as law enforcement officers as well, and then kind of corrected himself and said, not really. So I'm not certain how he put it, but that sounds like good news. Anyway, this is actually as our brave law enforcement arrests. The arrests are very brave, and removes dangerous criminal illegal aliens, which may or may not be true about the people they took, including murderers, rapists, and gang members from our communities. America can be proud of the professionalism our officers bring to the job day in and day out. They do note, before I do, they'll note that most people arrested by ICE agents in the first 6 months of 2025 in Colorado and Wyoming did not have any criminal convictions, according to ICE data. I don't know how good ICE data is, but why wouldn't they fake it up and say that they all have criminal records? I'm not sure why they're so lazy and don't try to fake it. Anyway, yes, their professional conduct, including, of course, the video circulating all over social media today, of, I guess, probably the last night in that suburban hotel for the ICE folks in the Minneapolis area, in which the ICE team in their off hours went to the window facing the protesters and gave them the finger and mooned them. I did notice, by the way, when the guy actually decided to pull down his pants, the rest of the ICE guys were like, I'm out of here. We're not hanging around for this. I thought that was funny. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp dollar bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We can move on to a couple other things here, but I did find at least mention of Tapper's, or the claim that Tapper had corrected himself. I thought it was interesting. It was actually in response to Mark Harris posting sometime yesterday. It was yesterday evening, about 13 hours ago, according to the little notation on Blue Sky, that on CNN, Anderson Cooper, using the sentence "that was a lie" over and over tonight regarding the words of Noem, Miller, and Bovino. Greg, of course, mentioning yesterday that dam had broken over at the New York Times, and now on the air at CNN. It's been a long time coming. It's like 10 years since they've been able to bring themselves around, since they've had the opportunity to bring themselves around and just say what's happening in the Trump camp is a lie. And they've done everything but say that. But now I guess the door is open. And then Stan Miller, noting in response to Mark Harris here, the Tapper said it too this afternoon. And then, who are we looking at here? VR2, I don't know what, itch, VR2 itch. ITCH. Well, at any rate, the note here is the Tapper also corrected himself when he first called ICE law enforcement. Thought that was notable as well. And we agree with you, even if we don't know exactly how to pronounce your name aloud. VR2itch, Twitch, like VR Twitch, maybe. Gosh, I don't know. I'm sorry about that, but that's probably not your top priority. Being heard. was probably what you were looking for, and I heard you. I thought it was a good point. Well done. Hope it's true. I don't see the clip, but I'd like to. And I don't know, maybe Aaron Rupar is circulating it. Also, I guess, housekeeping note, every day, try to find something special in each day. And the internet is always great for reminding you when it's the anniversary of the rise to fame of some meme or another, some legendary meme. Today, where Mr. Tom tells us, all the way, I guess, from the UK, you know how you can have your own customized dot after your blue sky name there. He's Mr. Tom.UK. But today is large boulder the size of a small boulder day. I've seen this one. Do you remember this one? This is from the San Miguel Sheriff's Office. Where's San Miguel? If I look at this big enlarged enough, will it tell me? San Miguel? No, because the resolution isn't good enough. So, but I'm going to guess this is clearly like Mountain West. Somewhere because of all the mountains that are in this picture. But where is San Miguel? I'll look it up. San Miguel County, probably. Bear with me. It's important that we find this. San Miguel County, Colorado. That's all I would have guessed. Looks like Colorado, and of course we just read an article from out of Colorado, so it makes sense that the serendipity of the situation would bring us to us. So the San Miguel Sheriff. Way back when, January 27th, 2020. So happy 6th anniversary to the posting of the warning on Twitter with a photo of a boulder. I would estimate this size at being around the size of a boulder. Seriously, is in the roadway. Look out. Plus, it's all very snowy and very dangerous as it is, but you would have to swerve in the snow to avoid a boulder in the right-hand lane, whatever. I don't know which direction they're heading. Doesn't matter. Large boulder, this is the post. Large boulder, the size of a small boulder. I'm not really sure how to judge that. Large boulder, the size of a small boulder, is completely blocking eastbound. No, I do know which direction. Eastbound lane, Highway 145 at mile marker 78 at Silver Pick Road. Please. Use caution. Use small amount of caution, but the size of a large amount of caution. And watch for emergency vehicles in the area. Some of these vehicles are the size of large, some of them the size... It's inexplicable, but you can see why people would want to remember it. Large boulder the size of a small boulder. Well, I'll be darned. Okay, so more news? Sure. Different front? Absolutely. I thought this sounded interesting. Looks to be a bit of a long read, but sounded like fun. Can I read it in the browser, or do I have to read it? I'll have to read it via Instapaper. I was a little worried about the headline on this one, "The Superhuman President," but of course it's in scare quotes. And then they very quickly follow it up. They don't just let that stand on its own. A superhuman president, a good faith attempt to ascertain the truth about Donald Trump's health. Oh my. And now that he's bruising on both hands, he's shaking hands so hard that his Boy Scout handshake hand is bruising as well. Everyone wants to know what's going on with his health. Illustrated with a particularly demeaning, I think, for Donald Trump, photo of him struggling on his way up the steps, presumably onto Air Force One. I think the caption notes that he's lost his balance and he's gripping, got a death grip. I guess he's got good grip strength, and that's a good sign for somebody his age, holding onto the handrail there. But this grimace on his face as he's gritting his teeth and freaking out about the possibility of falling down, which is wise. There's nothing wrong with that. And at 80, look, I'm not 80, and I tripped on my way up the stairs yesterday and smashed my elbow into the wall. I can sympathize. I just won't, because it's Donald Trump. The situation I can sympathize with, Donald Trump falling down the stairs, well, I can sympathize with that too. Not that I feel bad about it. I can sympathize with the idea of it, and I see why people want to see it. Anyway, that was from June of last year, stumbling as he boards Air Force One. And it's really just because it's not luxurious enough, and they're waiting for the gutter plane. How are we doing on the refurbishment of the gutter gifted aircraft, by the way? I don't know if there's any updates on that. Well, at any rate, Ben Terrace wrote this for New York Magazine, and published it just yesterday. I was intrigued by the willingness to go with the superhuman president and risk ire, but they did follow it up right away with that subheader. Now, Ben writes, when I arrived at the Oval Office in December to talk to Donald Trump, I vomited in my suit. But no, it just says that when he arrived to talk to Trump about his health, not his vomiting at having to be near the smelly bastard, but Trump's own health. The president was standing next to a couple of men clutching pieces of paper labeled, in all caps, talking points about his own health. Anyway, these are two doctors. Thank you. Trump told me before I could ask a question. And by the way, I don't know them. They're not my best friends. They're respected doctors that practice out of Walter Reed. And they happen to be taking care of me for anything. But I don't need any taken care of because I'm in perfect health. I do purposely every year or less a physical because I think the American people should know that the president is healthy, so you don't get a guy like the last one who was the worst thing that ever happened to older people. Because I know people in their 90s that are 100%. Gary Player is 90 years old. He shot 70 with me the other day. And that, of course, is the barometer of everything. Trump gestured at everyone present, to me, the doctors, the press secretary, Caroline Levitt, to follow him into the room. Let's sit for a couple of minutes, he said. I hate to waste a lot of time on this, but if you're going to write a bad story about my health, I'm going to sue the ass off the New York Magazine, which is, by the way, where this is published. I forgot to tell you that. There will be a time when you can write that story, maybe in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. 5 years, no one's going to care, I guess. Go ahead and sit down. Resigned to the fact that this story is going to happen and that he has less than 5 years left. Despite the president's protests, the White House realizes that the time to talk about his health is now. Speculation about his fitness for office is rampant. Armchair physicians have given him months and sometimes even days to live. Damn. All right. Still beating the odds. Can I bet on this on Kalshi, the breakfast betting of champions? Anyway, that right there looks like it's the physical therapist. Sorry. That right there looks like a leg bag for a urinary catheter. A physical therapist claimed in an Instagram with 19 million views, pointing to a bulge in Trump's pants. And boy, is Trump happy that there's a bulge in his pants, but not there. In recent months, Trump has been caught seeming to fall asleep during public events, making him the butt of recurring jokes on The Onion. For instance, Trump appears to doze during stroke. God. The Onion. His right hand is constantly bruised and often bandaged. In July, his ankles swelled up like the Michelin Man, a symptom, his doctor said, of chronic venous insufficiency, a common circulatory condition. In August, when Trump took a break from public appearances for a few days, "Trump is dead" began trending on social media. I got calls from friends that said, "Thank God you picked up the phone," Trump told. Oh, this is Trump. Friends called me, "Thank God you picked up the phone because there's a report that you died." I wouldn't be thanking God for that. In September, Trump made headlines at a 9/11 memorial event because the right side of his face appeared droopy, although he's just a droopy guy, I think, in general. In October, he went to Walter Reed and received what he said was an MRI, and when asked why, he suspiciously couldn't recall which part of his body had been imaged. On New Year's Eve, he was spotted apparently limping into a black tie party at Pervalago. In January, his mental fitness was called into question when he demanded control of Greenland because he hadn't been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, prompting calls for Congress to invoke the 25th Amendment, which they don't do, I don't think. And later that month, he showed up in Davos with a new bruise on his left hand. I'll have to review the 25th Amendment, but I'm pretty sure that it is a cabinet removal rather than a congressional removal, but I think that would be a distraction from what we're reading. So this is very difficult, but I put the Constitution back down, so we'll keep reading. That Trump couldn't stop talking about his perfect health at rallies and on Truth Social only convinced people that something was wrong. They don't believe him about anything. That he started making jokes about how he wasn't on track to get into heaven only added more fodder for conspiracy theorists, and the fact that his predecessor in the Oval Office began his disastrous decline at about the same age has only made the questions surrounding Trump's health more palpably urgent. I feel the same as I did 40 years ago. Disgusting and lecherous, I guess. He said, settling in behind the resolute desk. Or maybe the facsimile he left behind after he stole the original and shipped it to Pervalago. Warm afternoon light from the window illuminated his famous hair, once dyed golden and now it's natural white. Is that right? His only concession to age, one of his senior staffers told me. His only concession to age. I don't know what his senior aides sound like, but probably evil like that. And when that happens, there's probably thunder, lightning, etc. In person, Trump looks trimmer than he does on television. That was nice of you to say. Though he denies he's ever been on a GLP-1, or as he calls it, the fat drug, which I understand you have to stay on for the rest of your life, which is fine because, there's plenty to go around for how much life he's got left, I think. His last physical this past April listed him as weighing 224 pounds. No way. But he told me he's currently about 235, which is also a no way. Not at 6 foot, even at 6'1". That frame is a lot closer to 300, I would think. He stands a little hunched and his eyes are puffy. No kidding. But he looks pretty good for a 79-year-old. His hearing, according to a senior staff member, isn't what it used to be. The staffer doesn't think Trump has noticed this about himself, despite regularly leaning in and requesting people speak up. His right hand, warm and soft during our handshake, looked like rhino hide on the back, dry and gray, the notorious bruise spread out like an ink blot test. The president's discolored hand has become something of a smoking gun for those on Donald Trump death watch. That's all of us. Evidence, perhaps, that he's getting surreptitious IVs to treat an undisclosed illness. They're looking very Queen Elizabeth-esque, the Bulwark's Tim Miller has said, referring to photos of Her Royal Highness's, do we have to call her that? Bruised hands shortly before she died. It doesn't help that Trump covers the bruise with a large dollop of makeup and can seem testy when people bring up the subject. Late last year, a Republican operative showed Trump his own hand injury to try to relate. He wasn't amused, the operative told me, when Trump met with the much younger Zoran Mamdani in the Oval Office in November. I watched up close as Trump spent the public portion of the meeting shielding the bruise with his left hand, which is now also bruised, so it won't help. On occasion, he would sneak a peek at the mark as if checking the time. This is only from shaking hands, he said now, rubbing his left thumb over the back of his right hand, a claim he would repeat to other journalists. Trump turned to the doctors, Captain Sean Barabella, his lead physician, and Colonel James Jones, a physician's assistant with a PhD in health science. How do you like that? The assistant is a colonel and the doctor's a captain. That's interesting. Can you just verify that? He said. Absolutely, said Barabella, a short man like Greg Bovino. Okay, Barabella gets the Barabella March now too. Okay, we don't really need to do it. It's a little piercing. Anyway, I've seen the president shaking hands for over an hour. Trump held up his non-shaking hand. Look, this one's perfect, he said. People say, what beautiful skin you have. Oh, my God. Unlikely. The White House said that the bruise that appeared on his left hand in Davos was caused by him hitting it against a table corner. Trump also blamed women's fingernails and rings for the cuts on his right hand, including one particularly nasty slice that came from a botched high five with Attorney General Pam Banty. So I guess if you high five him hard enough, his hand will just explode in a spray of blood. Be interesting to watch. It would be easy, Trump said, to stop the bruising and end the rumors of his imminent demise. All he would have to do is stop taking so much aspirin, which he claims is necessary to prevent his blood from becoming too thick. Aspirin. Baby aspirin as a blood thinner, well known, but apparently nothing baby about my aspirin. And I take like 3, 4, 5 of them. I need nice thin blood. I mean, that's actually what he said. Here it is. I want thin blood, he says. Real thin blood. By the way, as people often point out, he's, of course, fiercely loyal to his family, which is weird because they all disappoint him at this point. But anyway, blood is thicker than water, and I'm seeking to make it thinner than water. So that's really interesting, just watching that happen. Real thin blood. In 2016, Trump shocked executives from a major pharmaceutical company when he told them that he took this is 2016, took 325 milligrams of the company's aspirin each day. Well, I don't know. How much is that? I should get a bottle of aspirin and look at how many milligrams there are in each one. And guess what? The executive says, you shouldn't be taking that much. According to one person familiar with his comments, do your doctors know? Trump said they did and didn't approve, but it works for me, he said. He told me, I've been doing it for 30 years and I don't want to change. You know what? You're in the Oval Office now, right? I don't want to change a thing. That's bad. Rather than change, Trump tends to force the world to adapt to him, or at least he tries, right? If there was a conspiracy of silence protecting Joe Biden, when questions arose about his mental and physical decline, there's a cacophony around Trump. Numerous members of his inner circle have clamored to tell me tales of the president's godlike virility. He can work harder and has a better memory, and he has more stamina and has more energy than a normal mortal. Who says that? That sounds almost like Stephen Chung, but it's the other Stephen Miller, who said that. The headline of your story should be, The Superhuman President. And lo, it was, but not quite the way you thought it was going to be. These strenuous assertions, strenuous objections, too. We have video of that. These strenuous assertions came alongside signs that made Trump seem more mortal than ever, from his dismal approval rating to the growing likelihood that Republicans will lose control of at least one chamber of Congress in this fall's midterms. Already, pundits have started calling him a lame duck, a term typically saved for the third year of a presidency, which might partly explain the vigorous flurry of activities undertaken in Nigeria, Venezuela, Minneapolis, Greenland, and beyond. And I guess we really should note this is a vigorous flurry of activity he has told other people to undertake while he watches TV and eats French fries. He has gamely entertained discussions about whether Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance will succeed him, which in one sense is an acknowledgement of his mortality. In another sense, the succession represents a way for him to live forever, a conceit I soon learned that was perpetuated by the bubble of loyalists and supplicants and advisors that constantly surrounds him and that seem indicative of his late empire stage of Trump's decade-plus long dominance of American life. Real fast, Trump said, turning to the doctors in the room. Is my health perfect? Your health is excellent, sir, Jones said. That is something. All right, let's see. Some pictures of him puffy-eyed dozing in the Oval Office, and then some pictures of him sitting on the panel stage at Davos. Basically looks like he's screaming into the microphone because he's got a weird mouth and he doesn't know how to use it. Now, for all his raging against those who would question his invincibility, Trump has acknowledged that he will, in fact, cease to exist one day. Huzzah. At Pervalago last year, with televisions tuned to former President Jimmy Carter's body lying in state in the U.S. Capitol, Trump surprised people in the room when he said, according to a person familiar with his comments, within 10 years, that'll be me. I hope not. Not because I don't hope that he dies, as soon as possible, but never hope to see him having a state funeral. But I think we're kind of past that now. But I guess there's still time to convict him of treason and execute him and then say, well, those are guys we definitely don't let lie in state. Carol Eyer Levitt said she doesn't recall Trump making such a comment, and that's why you call her that. In a not morbid way, that quote, not morbid way, he has, according to senior White House officials, been thinking more about what he will be remembered for. Even the crazy ballroom, that's in the quotes, the crazy ballroom that's being built on the site of the demolished East Wing, this official said, is about leaving a legacy here. Crazy ballroom. I guess they got to find out who that guy is and throw him off a bridge. His desire to leave something tangible behind might also explain the Arc de Trump that he wants to erect in Washington, or the decision to slap his name on the Kennedy Center. He doesn't think of legacy in terms of policies enacted, a Republican operative with ties to the administration told me. It's buildings he can leave behind and prizes he can win, the most coveted of which, of course, is the Nobel Peace Prize, which he managed to finagle from Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado in January. We say in January as if it wasn't still January, but I guess we're leaving a legacy with this article. You'll read it next month, too. He's having more fun building this ballroom than I can possibly tell you, Eric Trump told me in January, on the day the building's architect released plans for its $400 million construction. Eric said his father isn't really one to talk much about the time he has left in this world. He's superstitious, he said. He likes occupying his mind, with what's in the present and not as much with what's in the future. He will say, you have the most beautiful assets in the world. I don't think Eric does a dad impression, but I'm gonna. You have the most beautiful assets in the world, and you will be able to enjoy them for a long time to come. Is it in some way on everybody's mind? Of course, you bet. It's on my mind. But he believes, and so do I, that he's a lot of years left. The specter of death sometimes manifests in the 2028 conversation, said the senior White House official. They said they vividly remember the period after Trump lost the 2020 election, back in the nobody loves Trump phase. Trump would show up to his Pervalago office every day in a suit and cufflinks, working well into the evening, even though there really wasn't much to do. But then, during the 2022 midterms, people started seeking out his endorsement, and those endorsements made a huge difference. Sometimes they help defeat people. He talks about his average in Republican primaries, they said, referring to what percentage of his endorsements go on to win. He was very cognizant of that imprint. And it's not good, though he'll misstate it all the time. He also has started sharing his feelings about his eventual successor. That's him thinking about when he won't be here in a different way, the official said. Trump has praised both Rubio and Vance in public, saying he couldn't be happier with either of them. The last 10 minutes. According to a person familiar with his thinking, he hasn't decided between the two. He tells JD, you're my guy. He tells Marco, you're my guy. Both have recently worked to impress the boss, Rubio by spearheading the operation to take out Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, and Vance by leading the campaign to suggest Renee Good, an activist killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis, was responsible for her own death. And I guess with things turning sour, I'll just add, in Minneapolis, and all the headlines being that Trump needs to reset, or at least reset and reshuffle the people in charge there. I guess the guy whose job it was to blame the death of activists on those activists themselves might not come out on top, at least for the conventional wisdom watch of this week. As Trump approaches 80, he has been sharing anecdotes about his father, according to another senior White House official, and how it wasn't until his old man retired that he truly started to act like the old man he actually was. I do hear that about retirement very often from other people, that sort of triggers the realization that you're older now and you start behaving that way. But lots of people have different theories about it, but it does seem to be a turning point for people, and you can understand why. What you've been doing your whole life is suddenly set aside. Anyway, in this way, Trump appears to believe that having the job of president of the United States is giving him life, which is why I'd like to revoke both. Anyway, he had an expression that I always remember. Oh, this is Trump, but okay. Trump told me in the Oval Office, to retire is to expire. As Eric Trump told me, you've seen a lot of people who smoke cigarettes until they're 95 years old, and the day they give up smoking, all of a sudden it's the end. I don't think my father could give up working. I don't see a lot of that, actually, but Eric Trump thinks he does. Anyway, Fred Trump died in 1999 at age 93. He had, Trump said, a heart that couldn't be stopped, although it was, with almost no health conditions to speak of throughout his long life. He had one problem, Trump said, at a certain age, about 86, 87, he started getting, what do they call it? He pointed to his forehead and looked to his press secretary for the word that escaped him. Well, okay. I see you there, Ben. Alzheimer's, Levitt said. Like an Alzheimer's thing, Trump said. Well, I don't have it. Is it something you think about at all? I asked. No, I don't think about it at all. You know why? He said. Because whatever it is, my attitude is whatever. So that is interesting. Do you think about it at all? I don't think about it. Why not? Because I don't think. So, you can't catch me thinking about it. Points to Temple. If I don't think at all. Mary Trump, the president's niece and a vocal critic, said he shouldn't be so blasé. When I talked to her on the phone in January, she described what it was like to watch her grandfather transform into a shell of his former self. As is often the case, it started slowly and then happened all at once. One of the first times I noticed it, she told me, was at some event where he was being honored, and I looked at him and I saw this deer in the headlights look, like he had no idea where he was. Now, when she watches her uncle on the public stage, Mary says she often sees flashes of her grandfather. Sometimes it does not seem like he's oriented to time and place, she said. And on occasion, I do see that deer in the headlights look. Trump, of course, disagrees with all these sorts of assessments of cognitive decline, which proliferate on social media every day after one of his rambling speeches. The opposite is true, he contends, often citing the fact that he aced, Nate, the ace of spades, aced 3 recent cognitive tests. I've taken a lot of them. He said at a bill signing in mid-January, I've aced all of them because I drink milk. Why Trump feels the need to take so many cognitive tests is a question he didn't want to linger on. He was at an event, too, by the way, that had something to do with RFK Jr. and his weird obsessions with whole milk, raw milk, whatever. So I guess he felt it was topical for him to say, I aced them because I drink milk. He's like doing an ad. Anyway, as far as he was concerned, his father's mental state near the end was just a footnote in a long, healthy life. I know this, he said. Genetically, I'm in great shape. My mother and her family lived long, well into their 90s. No heart disease in my family. No this, no that. I have a friend whose mother died at 49 of a heart attack. His father died at 51 of a heart attack. He's now 60. I said, you're effed. Nice. All right, welcome back, everybody. There, we didn't have the microphone on when I said all right, but it is all right. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Well, let's continue on with the reading. It's actually quite a long article, but it's entertaining. And while we're waiting for Minneapolis to gel and then find out, one, how many of the ICE operatives and Border Patrol operatives are actually leaving, who the Homeland Security Secretary might actually be, and where they're headed next, we might as well pay some attention to this just to set the scene, in case. Say, a nice president you got here. It'd be a shame if something happened to him, though it would not be a shame. And what's happening to him already has already begun. It's out of our control. Anyway, the nice comment that he makes to the person whose parents died of heart attacks at relatively young ages. He says he's now 60. I don't believe that he actually has such a friend, but anyway. And I said, you're effed. And he actually, I'm cleaning it up. But anyway, apparently people love to hear a president say that. He watches everything he eats, but you can't beat genetics, he says. And he's hearing that straight from Stephen Miller, who, by the way, is now, I assume so because he's the Nazi in residence. But honestly, I've seen Stephen Miller, and I don't know that he's won any kind of genetic lottery. And, of course, I've seen Donald Trump, too. And like I said, he looks like a deflated basketball. You tell me about genetics. Trump's diet is famously terrible. He eats a ton of candy and he eats meat. One senior White House official told me, no vegetables. I didn't realize that he had said this. He eats no meat and no vegetables, like a kid, basically. The quote here is from RFK Jr., which I don't know when he said it, but the quote is, I don't know how he's alive. That's pretty good. That's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Department of Secretary of Health and Human Services, right? Anyway, RFK Jr. has said this about Trump's unhinged eating habits. That's a quote too, unhinged. He doesn't believe in exercise. I've heard this one. Recently, after he'd been dealing with swelling in his lower legs and ankles owing to his circulatory condition, doctors recommended he walk more. He asked his staff if there was anything else he could do instead. Well, I mean, we want you to move your body weight around using your feet and ankles. So what does that mean? Walk more. Is there anything else I can do? No. I mean, the problem is with your feet. We want you to move around using your feet and ankles. There's no other way to do it. Sure. You know what? There's something else you can do. Ballet. Well, that's not happening either. So, all right. Is there anything else I can do? Sure. How about you watch television and we tell you you're awesome? Okay. That sounds pretty good, actually. And he barely, I guess you could go swimming, I suppose. There is that. Kicking and whatever, fluttering your feet. But he's not going to do that either. Anyway, he barely sleeps as well, apparently. There are members of his team who worry his lifestyle may not be sustainable in the long term. He will collapse, a senior staffer said, referring to his need for weekend naps. I mean, I sympathize. We all need it. It is interesting, too. He barely sleeps unless he's, working, at which point he barely stays awake. But he's supposed to sleep at night. Trump, however, brushes off any suggestion that he should get more rest. I think 5 hours is plenty, he says. And I find when I'm really enjoying myself, I sleep less. Okay, sure, whatever, man. Then embedded are some different time period pictures of his hand, the bruise, the weird makeup that he's got. And if that's makeup, I don't even know what skin tone that's supposed to be. That looks like calamine lotion, like he's got poison ivy on his hand. It's just the wrong color for his hands. And I'm not saying that because he has makeup, like the orange stuff that on his face he doesn't put on his hands, which always baffles me. But then, the fact that he doesn't cover his whole face baffles me. I understand why. He's just got poor vision and he can't see in the mirror that he hasn't actually covered his entire face. But anyway, there you have it. Anyhow, let's continue on with the story on the bruise. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the captions on the bruise photos. On December 2nd, forget the bruise. Trump called a cabinet meeting at the White House. The live-streamed event was over 2 hours long and featured the kind of outlandish obeisance we have grown accustomed to in his second administration. Sir, you made it through a hurricane season without a hurricane, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said. You even kept the hurricanes away. So we appreciate that. And his lackeys gushed over his leadership. As they did, Trump's eyelids grew heavier and heavier until finally he appeared to nod off multiple times. And this was when they were praising him. We used to think he fell asleep when they're not talking about me, so I don't care. Now they are talking about you, and you're still asleep. Shortly after the meeting ended, Levitt beckoned me into her West Wing office for an interview with Will Scharf, the White House staff secretary. He promptly told me I hadn't seen what I thought I'd just seen. He's always awake, always alert, always knows what's going on, said Scharf, whose job requires him to be in almost constant contact with the president. Imagine what's happening to your nose, dude. His work pace is remarkable. My dad is a few years older than he is. My dad couldn't do the job that the president does. I'm sure dad's like, thanks a lot, kid. You're out of the will. I don't think I could do the job the president does. He added, it's not dozing. Sometimes if he's thinking about something, and I made this mistake at first too, he adopts a pose. He leans back or leans forward a little bit, and he either closes his eyes or looks down because he often takes notes in his lap. I think he takes note of what is in his lap. I don't think he's taking any notes. If anything, he's probably tapping on the phone. But I like that description. Sometimes when he's thinking about things, he leans forward, or sometimes he leans back, or sometimes his head tips to one side. Occasionally he says, all of this saliva is getting in the way of my deep consideration of what's happening. I think I'll let it out of my mouth and onto my tie. It's like, what kind of, sometimes when he's really thinking, he will lay flat, and he often remarks to me afterwards, he'll say, I like to let the blood circulate into my brain and the rest of my body evenly, and that way it helps me think. And sometimes when I'm thinking really hard about something, I make a noise that it's the gears of my brain literally turning. You can literally hear the gears turning in my mind. It sounds like this. We need some oil sometimes on the gears. But that's a noise that I make when I'm thinking. And you got these idiots believing it, right? Sure. Okay. Sometimes the thoughts escape me. Right? Exactly. There's so much thinking going on inside my body. It seeps out my pores and whatever else. Out of my whatever. Okay, sure, pal. When the president rests his eyes, Levitt chimed in. It's like my grandparents. I'm not sleeping. I'm resting my eyes. He actually is actively listening. That's right. He's acting as though he's listening. His energy levels are so good, she claimed, that even elite members of the military can't keep up with his work schedule. Wow, huh? The Marine sentries who stand outside the Oval Office, they had to request more staff and bring up more Marines because the president is in the Oval Office so much. Well, they're standing there, and guarding and being alert. He's in there snoozing with his feet up. Well, you see, he's outlasting elite members of the military. They're doing different things. They never had to do that before. They had to request more guys to stand by the door because they are running out of men to fill the shifts. What a claim. He's working harder now than he did in his entire life, Levitt added, even in real estate, when he was on top of the world in New York. And, I mean, A, I don't believe it, but B, even if it were true or an accurate description of what's going on, yeah, it's harder to be the president than to be a real estate guy in New York. Wow, what a concession. All my conversations with members of Trump World went like this. When he signed the Epstein transparency bill, he was here until, I think, 9:50, 9:45. He's counting down now, or whatever. The White House Communications Director, Stephen Chung, later told me. And the next day, he was here till 9:30. As much as I hate to admit it, I'm exhausted going into the workday, and I'm exhausted at the end of the workday trying to keep up with the president. But I mean, I think a lot of things exhaust Stephen Chung, if you can imagine it. Anyway, if you've seen him, you know what I'm talking about. I mean it. On my children. Eric Trump now talking. I've never seen my father take a vacation. His whole life is a vacation. He's golfing every second. What, are you kidding? Never seen him take a vacation. At different points in our interview, he called his father miraculous, remarkable, incredible, and possessing a level of energy unlike anything I've ever seen. As long as that guy's got a pen and the ability to call a lawyer and change his will, I'm going to keep saying this about him. If you look at his EKG, that tells it all. James Jones, the physician's assistant, told me. The AI analysis shows he's 14 years younger. So age 65. His stamina demonstrates that. That's AI for you. We don't believe it about anything. We get and by the way, that's also interesting. Why bother asking doctors when you can just have AI tell you how he's doing? We get a view that nobody else does. Nobody can stay up with him. That may be true too. If he's talking, there's no way people can stay awake when I'm talking. The rest of the staff is tired. We are too, and he's not. A few weeks later, Kennedy told Miller's wife, Katie Miller, that on her podcast, that Mehmet Oz, the administrator for Medicare and Medicaid, had told him that Trump, quote, has the highest testosterone level he's ever seen for an individual who is over 70 years old. Okay, at least there's a caveat. Texas Representative Ronnie Jackson, Trump's former physician, recalled for me the time he put the president on a treadmill during his first term to check his heart health and was shocked by what he saw. Trump wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt. I would be shocked. He looked like an athlete, for the record, Jackson said. Well, he looked like a weeble. Come on. Spent about 10 minutes walking at a brisk pace on an incline, supposedly achieving what fewer than 10% of people his age could. His heart health is so phenomenal. Why did he ask if he could do something other than walking? I don't know. His heart health is so phenomenal, so much so that the cardiologist from his last exam pretty much told his medical team that based on his age, he's pretty much done with cardiac workups, he told me. Whenever he dies of someday, it won't be his heart, because he ain't got one. I don't know. That's pretty interesting. What an interesting view of things. He did so well on his workup that we're done with this. We never need to have a cardiac checkup again. That sounds like a cardiologist, don't you think? That's most actual cardiologists would just say, well, you're fine today. That'll never change. Come back never. Sure. Oh, all the doctors are saying that to me. And here you go. Here's ready for Marco Rubio. The guy is too healthy. Marco Rubio, doctor, said in an interview at the White House, he's too active. Rubio, who in addition to running the State Department is the acting, National Security Advisor and the acting archivist of the U.S. and, of course, angling to become president after Trump. He's going to say anything. He may be, Rubio says, about himself, he doesn't say it about himself, sorry. He may be one of the busiest men in Washington with all of his various acting jobs. On the day I met with him, he was running behind schedule to get to a Capitol Hill briefing with top lawmakers. Still, he took time out of his day to regale me with stories about the president's unparalleled memory and attention to detail. That's not time out of his day. That is his day. Praising Trump. Once, Trump noticed that Rubio's shoes... I don't know where this is coming from. I'll get my censoring horn ready for you. So once Trump noticed that Rubio's shoes looked shitty. And does that count as bleeping it? They looked, like they. I don't know what that means. They look bad, or it looks like you stepped in something. I don't know. All right. So at a later meeting, the president presented him with a gift, a signed shoebox containing a pair of size 12s. It's not interesting because Rubio wears a size 4. I have them on and they're perfect, Rubio said, pointing to his shiny black dress shoes. Another time, Trump perceived that the chandeliers in the State Department were missing medallions, the ornamental discs installed on the ceiling. A few days later, Trump called Rubio into his office with dozens of medallion samples. I don't even know how many I need, Rubio recalled telling Trump. He said, I think you need 12. And sure enough, Rubio shook his head in awe. I try to match it as much as I can. It's just not natural to me. He knew the number. Sure enough, that's exactly what he needs. He's like Rain Man. Anyway, there's one place in particular where Rubio is unable to keep up with the president, Air Force One. Rubio said he needs to get some rest on overseas flights, but Trump never naps on the plane. So the Secretary of State, a man tasked with installing fear in the hearts of enemies and confidence among our allies, spends part of most flights hiding from a nearly 80-year-old man. There's an office with 2 couches, and I usually want to sleep on one of those 2 couches, Rubio said. But what I do is I cocoon myself in a blanket. I cover my head. I look like a mummy. Here, Rubio mimed pulling a blanket over his body as if he were auditioning for a Snuggie commercial. And I do that because I know that at some point on the flight he's going to emerge from the cabin and start prowling the hallways to see who's awake. I want him to think it's a staffer who fell asleep. I don't want him to see a Secretary of State sleeping on a couch and think, oh, this guy is weak. When I asked about whether Trump was catching Z's during those heavily lidded moments on camera, Rubio scoffed. It's a listening mechanism, he said. In the Oval Office, Trump offered a different defense of closing his eyes during the cabinet meeting. He told everybody to say he's just concentrating really hard. They went out on the, walked the plank for him, and then he said, surprise, rug pull, I'm going to say something different. Why does he close his eyes? It's boring as hell, he said. I'm going around the room, and I've got 28 guys. The last one was 3.5 hours. So I sit back and listen, and I move my hands so that people know I'm listening. I'm hearing every word, and I can't wait to get out. Well, at least that's sort of honest. Like, this is boring, and I can't take it. I am asleep, is what he's saying. And by the way, whenever I hear Trump talking and I have to listen to it, I'm moving my hand, too. not necessarily to show him that I'm awake, he can't see it, but to signal what I think of it. You can imagine what it might be doing. Just then, Trump's phone began ringing and a name flashed on his screen. Ari Emanuel, Hollywood super agent, inspiration for Jeremy Piven's character in HBO's Entourage, and brother of possible 2028 Democratic presidential candidate Rahm. The great Ari Emanuel, Trump said, interrupting our interview to Gab. What's up, Ari? What's happening? Hey, Ari, I have a wonderful writer here. He's doing a story for New York Magazine. He says, so are you in good health? Is your mind as sharp? Trump put Emanuel, who had called to talk to the president about tax incentives for Hollywood studios, on the speaker. That's a great cause, of course. What a great way to dedicate your life. I have the great Ari Emanuel. Let him tell you whether Trump's mind is sharp. You'll be my reference. Go ahead, Ari. His name is Ben. There was a slight pause as Emanuel seemed to consider what to say. There's the pause. I just did it for you. Hi, Ben, he said. I represented him for 9 years. It doesn't seem like he's changed at all. His wit, his remembering everything, being on it. He seems normal. There was one caveat, however. I haven't seen him in about 5 years, he said. But we speak a lot, Trump said. And he would say, Trump's losing it. I guess he would say it if he believed it, right? He put the phone down on the table as Emanuel turned the conversation to a memo he'd written for Trump about getting rebates for movies, television shows, and commercials, which Trump said he'd take a look at. I couldn't get a better reference than Ari, Trump said to me with Emanuel still on the line. They made a television show about this effing guy. He's a legend. I cleaned it up for you a little bit. He loves cursing, and he's getting more free with it, I guess, as he gets older, as often happens. Trump calls himself the most transparent president in history. He's talking about his skin, of course. But getting an accurate readout of his health is a difficult task. He has a history of obfuscation on the topic. During his first campaign, Trump's personal doctor, Harold Bornstein, who you recall is dead, I believe, issued a letter saying the soon-to-be president was in astonishingly excellent health. Later, Bornstein admitted that the letter had been written by Trump. In late 2020, Trump reportedly suffered a bout of COVID that was much more severe than he or his advisors ever let on. Mark Meadows, then his chief of staff, reportedly thought he might die. I had thought the same, by the way, and once again, have to admonish the doctors at Walter Reed. I know they're great doctors and all, but trolley problem was staring you in the face. A lot fewer people would be dead now had the disease just run its course and taken the president from us at that time. Anyway, that didn't happen. Then there's the fact that there's enough evidence in the public record to fit anyone's prior beliefs. He clearly seemed to be sleeping in meetings, but can speak on his feet for over an hour during late-night rallies. He goes on grueling international trips, and his voice often sounds shot for days after he returns. The death rattle, we call it. He stayed up all night at Pervolago to track the capture of Maduro and took a phone call from the New York Times reporter at 4:30 a.m., but then seemed to be struggling with the stairs of Air Force One. In November, Trump went viral for having a hard time walking in a video with his grandson, but later that day I watched him march in lockstep with Melania through a rainy field to get to his Marine One helicopter, it's not his, without so much as a stumble. Wowee. Some typically worrisome signs of mental deterioration, erratic behavior, convoluted speaking, threatening to invade Greenland because he didn't receive a Nobel Peace Prize, may also be Trump being Trump. In October, Trump made news with a pair of comments from Air Force One. In the first, he said he wouldn't rule out serving a third presidential term, even though he admitted it's pretty clear I'm not allowed to run. Some have theorized that the third term talk is a way for Trump to counteract his lame duck status, but the idea has titillated some of Trump's most ardent supporters, none more so than his political consigliere, Steve Bannon. It's not his final term, Bannon told me. He's going to run again in 28. Hell, he's running now. It's obvious. He's got another 10 years at least. Retiring would mean expiring, after all, and Bannon is convinced that much of Trump's BDE, as he puts it, comes from the job. It's not human, not at that age. Bannon has floated a presidential run of his own, supposedly to continue promoting his America First agenda. When I asked Eric Trump, however, if his father would run for president again, he demurred, saying he would find something to do in Republican politics, perhaps as a kingmaker for the party. The second piece of news from Air Force One came when Trump mentioned that he had undergone magnetic resonance imaging earlier in the month at Walter Reed. I gave you the full results, he said, despite this being the first anyone had ever heard about an MRI for him, a scan often used for disease detection and monitoring. As for why he had the imaging done in the first place, you'll have to ask the doctors, he said. Now, in the Oval Office, I had the chance to do just that. Can you tell me about the MRI? I said. Yes, please, Trump said, leaning forward in his chair. It was the worst effing thing I ever did, and I blame them. Trump pointed at Barabella and Jones, who sat motionless beside me. They wanted me to take it, and I took it. Because I took it, people want to say, oh, there must be something wrong. Trump turned again to the doctors. Can you explain why you asked me that? He said, shaking his head. Stupidest thing I've ever done. Oh, no, it's not. Jones shuffled the handful of papers in his lap, each one filled with blocks of typed text and hand-scrawled notes, I guess, from the president. This is what you're allowed to say. We asked him to do it because he had a scheduled trip at Walter Reed. He said, while he was there, I asked him if we could complete some additional physical things that we were planning on doing annually, and he was like, okay, we will work it in for time schedules. It wasn't actually an MRI. We did a computerized tomography exam. Tomography? Okay. Of his chest and his abdomen, Jones said. It's MRI-like. And not for any reason, Trump said, cutting in. It's because the machine was sitting there. I'm sitting right next to it. Well, the machine existed, so we did the test. Everybody knows that's how it works. There was no evidence of narrowing of any blood vessels, said Barabella, and no abnormalities of the heart. The reason for the imaging, as routine as we stated, is that any patient his age could have things, and we ruled them out, said Jones. The story should be about the fact that the results were perfect. They did not demonstrate any problems. Excellent results, Barabella muttered, almost to himself. They were excellent results. He's like, please don't torture me anymore. I love these two guys. They're great, Trump said, but I don't know them. They're White House doctors. For weeks, I'd been trying to get a handle on Trump's health. I'd come away thinking he might be pretty healthy for an almost octogenarian, if not quite the superhuman president, or that his team would have me believe. But I'm not a doctor, nor do I spend a lot of time with Trump. Now I was in a room with actual doctors who actually treat the president and know him. Perhaps more than anyone else in this country, they would be in a position to know, yet their proximity to him could be part of the problem. You worked for the Obamas, didn't you? Levitt said to Jones. Yes, I did, he said. Jones had, in fact, worked from 2009 to 2018 as a senior medical leader in the White House. At the end of his presidency, Barack Obama, a fitness fanatic, rumored to allow himself precisely 7 almonds a night. I think I've already heard years ago that wasn't really true, but he was, at the time, 55 years old. Who's healthier, Obama or President Trump? I asked. Trump stared across the desk, making eye contact with Jones. Jones did not hesitate. President Trump, he said. Sure. Trump nodded. There was no sign of a smile, as if there could not have been any other answer to that question. Write that, he said, turning to me. So there you go. We made it to the end of this thing. I don't know if it was the most important article in the world, and I don't think there was any surprises in it. Just, I don't know, bringing you back to a reality that if there's ever an end to this ongoing crisis with ICE and the Border Patrol guys and all the other 10 agencies that are out there terrorizing people, we're going to be back where we started with Trump and his health. Okay, so, man, that's a lot. Now, we got a couple other directions that we could go. We got a third break coming up here. I'm going to need the time, I think, I don't know if I'm going to get a chance, but scan the headlines on the social media so we can see that the world hasn't exploded while we were reading that article. But man, there's an awful lot still happening here, and a lot of other stories I have tucked away for your consideration, including some interesting stuff. I always find the logistics stuff to be of interest. And when you find out that there's an unforeseen problem with something major that seems so basic if you really stop and take a look. And I'm teasing you a story about military affairs. Golden Dome, as Trump calls it, one of his, basically an updated Star Wars idea. But appears there's some logistical issues out there about that as well. Like I said, I always found it fascinating. Back when it was the SDI days, when they observed to us that, even a missile defense system that's 99% effective still lets enough warheads through to destroy everything.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen versus Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I wanted to bring to your attention before we start off on the next reading adventure here. Greg Sargent has been very active this morning, outlining happenings, I guess, on Capitol Hill among legislators, pondering what to do about funding for Border Patrol and for ICE, etc., and how to approach the problem procedurally and legislatively. And he's made a couple of, he's been reporting, talking to Chris Murphy about things. It's been very interesting. Murphy, of course, among the more strident in opposition to funding for those agencies. But it's also starting to look like they are getting around to the point where, I guess probably where a lot of people thought Democrats might actually land. Instead of holding out for zeroing out their funding, they will land somewhere in the middle, which, the comments that I've seen on it, unhappy with it, certainly, but other people pointing out, even from a practical standpoint, well, see, you shouldn't be floating this as your compromise. You should be pressing for abolition and zero funding, so that when there's pushback, you end up landing here. If you make this your position, you're going to land in the middle of, no, more money for these guys and your weird compromise. But what can I tell you? There's who knows what the correct strategy is on some of this stuff. As Greg Sargent has put it, there's two things that I've seen circulating from Greg that I think are important to the debate. First, the warning from Chris Murphy that he quotes here: if people don't see us fighting on something as existential as whether we condone the federal government murdering our own citizens, there will be a mass withdrawal from politics altogether. So as an electoral issue, might be wise to stake out a maximalist position, even if you end up somewhere else. But yes, that's and Greg follows that up, of course, in his reporting in the New Republic, and says this is a critical point from Murphy. If Dems fold on ICE now, it could be a disaster in the midterms. The result will be a lot of voters who tend to turn out in midterm elections just won't. And there's a lengthy exchange about that, which you should probably read and take a look at for yourself. I'm going to head in a different direction at the moment. But then Greg also says Dems on Capitol Hill are coalescing around 5 restrictions on ICE, I'm told. And remember, I as disappointing as they might be to you, I do want you to keep in mind what Rosa DeLauro had to say yesterday, which is that I guess you should keep in mind that even if you were able to zero ICE out in the upcoming regular appropriations bills, they've just gotten themselves a lump sum $75 billion, wasn't it? It's insane numbers from the one big beautiful bill. Like, that's a done deal. And at zero for the upcoming year, they'd still be okay in the regular appropriations bills. They don't need it. And so you could fight over it, or you could block its passage, but then you end up zeroing out the other agencies too. And maybe that's not so bad, but I don't know if they would prefer a finer instrument, I'm sure, than a blunt instrument, which also defunds the Coast Guard and the TSA and FEMA. But anyway, Greg reports that the 5 restrictions on ICE, and I'm just telling you what they are. I fully understand. I've seen a dozen or more people this morning pointing out, look, here's video of what ICE is up to today. Today they're beating up another observer, tackling them, handcuffing them for staying out of the way, but saying something that hurts the feelings of one of the ICE officers. So they're not all gone from Minneapolis. Anyway, any number of examples of behavior that simply cannot be reined in or reformed. And yet, the position they're coalescing around, apparently, is that 1, the DHS will be required to cooperate with state probes, presumably state investigations of people they murder. And Greg notes that this is a big get. And it is, if they get it. I mean, it's big that Republicans would allow it to be codified in law that there must be cooperation from the DHS in state probes. That's nice. But as we began right in the beginning of the show, first story we covered is federal judges are finding repeatedly that they're just not complying with law and not complying with court orders to obey the law either. So I don't know how much it's worth. And that's the first thing people lay out there. And it's true. Second item out of the 5, CBP stays at border, which I guess the negotiators think means having them stick to their original jurisdiction, that the border region can go no further inland, let's say, than, what is it, like 100 miles, which is way too much. But they say we can't just be at the border. What do we do about catching people who've slipped by border patrols but are still in the area? We want a 100-mile buffer zone. But as others have pointed out, the buffer zone, if you look at it from our eastern and western borders, that means Los Angeles, New York, easily within border region. So that might not be worth a whole lot. Might they mean something more specific? The concentrating of the forces at the southern border, where the problem, such as it exists in Republican minds, is supposedly concentrated? We don't know yet. Third item, got to have warrants for your arrests. No more administrative warrants, no more paperwork filled out, essentially forged by ICE officers on their way to, or Border Patrol officers or whoever it may be, on their way to raids. Okay. But again, all of these points problematic to actually enforce. Next up, the fourth one, IDs and body cams on all these officers. Yeah, great, maybe, sure. What if they don't comply? I don't know. And lastly, ICE out of churches and schools. All of them fall prey to the question of, will they actually obey the law, and can courts make them do so? All right, where were we? Oh, yes, right. I had been teasing a story about logistics with a story of my own about logistics, which was perhaps incomplete. But do you remember that far back? Back in the SDI days, that, I don't know, maybe not everybody was chatting about this at the time, but as a student I was, but pointing out as a student of international affairs, essentially, and doing a lot of study of what was then the Soviet bloc, and the idea that we could implement this Star Wars type shield, SDI shield against nuclear weapons. Well, there were a number of problems with them, and even in those days, and that was essentially that there were so many warheads sitting on that point. I guess it's still the main body of our nuclear defenses, the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. Although much of the chat is about other kinds of missiles that are more modern, and that, part of the reason that they became a bigger part of the modern force, cruise missiles and other non-ballistic versions, I guess. You don't have to launch them into space, essentially, is the problem. That's where SDI works. This Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, space-based defenses. And if your missiles are air-breathing, as they like to say, I guess, or they used to we were told they liked to say back in the day in military parlance, means they don't exit the atmosphere and they aren't then subject to the SDI safety net. Well, then that's not useful at all. But back in the days when most of the warheads, and I guess they all still sit mostly on intercontinental ballistic missiles, the idea was you'd take them out in space before they re-entered the atmosphere and thereby defend the homeland or wherever you were defending. Problem was that there were so many of them, and they are drastically reduced in number since then, but there were so many of them that even a 99% effective SDI meant there were still enough warheads getting through to pretty much wipe out the population of the United States or wherever they might be targeting. So in the end, you would have spent your trillions of dollars and, instead of, as they say, making the rubble bounce, right? You would just reduce everything to rubble. Dang. Well, mission accomplished. And I think that was probably the logistical death of SDI, where they said, if we can make this thing 99% effective and it doesn't save the population, is this worth pursuing? And I guess we now find ourselves in a similar threat. Now we have Golden Dome in the offing. And what am I reading here? Can I open this? Space News. How do you like that? SpaceNews.com has the story from Sandra Irwin, published this Sunday, the 25th. Golden Dome, and we're not talking about Trump's head, but Golden Dome is forcing the Pentagon to confront missile defense economics. I guess that was sort of what, part of, I would call it an economic analysis, I suppose, of the SDI initiative. Here, General Michael, is it Geitlin? Perhaps Guetlein? Geitlin? Maybe. That sounds like a reasonable pronunciation. I have no idea. But the general says that deterrence hinges less on exquisite technology than on cost, production scale, and industrial execution. Sounds interesting. It is a little goofy looking at him in his Space Force uniform here, and I really just don't love those things. Anyway, here's the general at the, where are they? The AFCEA Space Industry Days Conference. That one. But the general, head of the Golden Dome Missile Defense Program, said that the success of this effort depends on the ability to field defenses that are both scalable and affordable, including new directed energy and other non-kinetic technologies aimed at lowering the cost of intercepting missiles. I think by non-kinetic, there's still kinetic energy involved here, but non-kinetic. I'm not even certain what they mean by, but directed energy and non-kinetic technologies. Are they saying non-explosive, like hyper speed? Sometimes they had these hyper hypervelocity missiles that they were just saying were destructive, not because they carried an explosive charge, but because they traveled at such high speed and would collide with these incoming nuclear vehicles and destroy them in the atmosphere. All right. Well, at any rate, I don't know if I could necessarily describe the function of these various weapons, defensive weapons to you, but it has a very big problem. It costs $1 bazillion. And even though they're willing to throw money at those problems and not, human problems that we actually experience here in the United States, it's still not going to work, and here's why. So speaking on January 23rd at the AFCEA Space Industry Days Conference in Los Angeles, Geitlin, or whatever his name is, however it's pronounced, said that the program's central challenge is the economics of missile defense. Before it was just the mathematics, the statistics of missile defense. Now the economics, though, specifically how the cost of each intercept limits how many interceptor shots the United States can afford to keep on hand. He described this as an issue of magazine depth, a term that refers to the number of interceptors available to respond to an attack. I guess like the magazine of a gun of any sort of make, right? If you've got a 10-round magazine, you got 10 shots at things. Magazine depth is the difference here. Missile defense systems with limited magazines can be exhausted quickly if an adversary launches multiple weapons or employs decoys. The thinking is that a system that can only handle a small number of intercepts does not provide credible deterrence. If you can knock 10 weapons out of the air and they launch 100, or they launch 100 decoys along with their 100 warheads, who knows what you're going to be able to knock? Well, you can knock, let's say you're 100% successful with your weapon. You knock 10 out of the air. Are they decoys? Were they the real thing? You won't find out until it's too late. The cost per kill, as they call it, has to come down, said Geitlin. Current U.S. missile defense interceptors, which were designed for regional or limited homeland defense missions, cost millions of dollars apiece and are used to defeat much lower cost weapons. That's a good point. Golden Dome, I think, having been patterned apparently after Iron Dome defenses in Israel, he got jealous of having that and he wanted one for himself. They were designed not to take out, of course, ballistic missiles, but rather basically homemade rockets launched out of Gaza, chiefly. Right, so there you're talking about very low-cost weapons being knocked down with very high-priced weapons. And the economics, to the extent that it matters, is between the economics of Israel and Gaza. I mean, it's enough of an imbalance that I don't know that economics necessarily the issue, but everywhere else, if you're talking about deterring state actors with much more, a deeper bench in terms of the resources, then that can become very taxing very quickly. Do you have enough intercepts to provide credible deterrence, right? Cost per kill becomes a problem. Analysts have pointed out that this imbalance invites adversaries to overwhelm defenses through volume. We have the most exquisite capabilities on the planet with a high probability of kill. They do not miss, but they take forever to build. They're exceptionally expensive. And as a result, I have very small magazine depths because the cost per kill is so high, said Geitlin. I have to flip that equation. Golden Dome is the Defense Department's efforts to design a next-generation homeland missile defense architecture capable of countering advanced threats such as hypersonic glide vehicles, modern ballistic missiles, and fractional orbital bombardment systems, which are relatively new to me, and I don't know that much about fractional orbital bombardment systems. Yikes, doesn't sound good. Unlike existing missile defense programs that largely rely on ground and sea-based interceptors, Golden Dome envisions a multi-layered system that integrates space-based sensors, communications and interceptors into a unified framework, basically a modified SDI, and of course that would be handed to Space Force. Pressure to scale production is the next section here. Geitland told the AFCEA conference that what the Pentagon needs immediately from industry is the ability to scale production and deliver low-cost ways to defeat missiles, including non-kinetic options. I think I need to look into more about what non-kinetic actually means so that I understand it a little bit better. But analysts say space-based interceptors capable of maneuvering on orbit could be effective, but would also be among the most expensive elements of any future architecture. Directed energy systems, including lasers, space blazers, photon torpedoes, and laser blasters, right? Lasers and neutral particle beams are among the concepts Geitland has highlighted as potential ways to drive down, the cost per shot while increasing magazine depth. I mean, they'd be incredibly expensive to develop those weapons, I guess, but you don't have to build discrete units over and over again and arm them with, this is how many missiles you can carry. Instead, I guess if it can generate lasers and neutral particle beams on its own, then, and they're not rockets that have to be launched from this thing. I see what they're getting at. Geitland also pointed to left of launch defenses, a phrase used to describe efforts to stop missile threats before a launch occurs. That can, left on the timeline, I suppose is what they're trying to get at here. This can include intelligence and surveillance activities that detect preparations, as well as non-kinetic actions that complicate or delay an adversary's ability to fire. The goal here is to reduce the number of missiles that ever need to be intercepted. That's wise. Sounds good. Because when you're trying to defend something the size of the United States, I can't do it the way we've done overseas. I have to have a new way of doing it, he said. The urgency to scale production and lower costs has already shaped Pentagon investment decisions. The Defense Department recently announced plans to directly invest in the production of interceptor missiles built by Lockheed Martin and solid rocket motors produced by L3 Harris Technologies. While not labeled as Golden Dome funding, these investments align directly with the program's emphasis on deeper magazines and lower per-unit costs. They also speak to Geitland's broader argument that Golden Dome is less a technology challenge than an industrial one. We're accelerating private capital investment, and we're taking private equity's view of the defense industrial base, Geitland said. I don't know if I like the sound of that. Adding that he regularly meets with investment bankers to help stabilize demand signals as companies seek capital to expand capacity. I'm a little bit lost on that one. That emphasis on economics was echoed in the National Defense Strategy released on January 23rd, which identifies defense of the homeland as the Pentagon's top priority. I guess that should be. The department will prioritize efforts to develop President Trump's Golden Dome for America, with a specific focus on options to cost-effectively defeat large missile barrages and other advanced aerial attacks, the document states. The next up, architecture to remain secret. Geitland said the details of the Golden Dome architecture will remain classified. He said, probably as it should, right? Anyway, he said conversations with industry are occurring almost exclusively through one-on-one engagements rather than open forums. That makes sense. After his confirmation as Golden Dome program manager in July, Geitland said foreign actors began cyber-targeting the defense industrial base, prompting senior officials to clamp down on public discussion. We have been quiet, he said. I have not been talking to industry consortiums. I've not been talking to the press. I've not been talking to the think tanks. It wasn't until September that I was allowed to even start talking to the Hill. That secrecy has begun to draw scrutiny. In a defense spending bill for fiscal year 2026 approved by the House last week, appropriators said they support Golden Dome but faulted the administration for failing to provide sufficient detail on how $23 billion in mandatory funding has been allocated. The bill directs the Pentagon to submit more detailed plans and justifications. Geitlin said the program is on track to meet the administration's timeline. By the summer of 28, we will be able to defend the entire nation against ballistic missiles. Oh boy, I don't know. As well as other generation aerial threats, he said, calling Golden Dome an unprecedented challenge. As Program Director Geitlin reports to the Deputy Secretary of Defense and has been granted unusually broad authorities. I have budget authority, contract authority, hiring authority, technical authority, security authority to get after protecting the homeland. The Golden Dome office, Geitlin said, currently has 52 staff and expects to grow to about 100, even though he is authorized to reach 300. Requirements are set centrally, but procurement is decentralized across the services and agencies. I've got the Space Force buying SBIs. Okay. Don't know what it is. I've got the Army buying munitions and sensors. I've got the Navy buying munitions. I've got the Missile Defense Agency. Remember them? Buying next-generation interceptors, glide phase interceptors, and a whole host of other capability, Geitlin said. He also works closely with the Space Development Agency's Low Earth Orbit Sensor and Transport Network. Geitlin noted that the Missile Defense Agency's SHIELD procurement, like the movies, vehicle is not part of Golden Dome, despite recent headlines about the large number of vendors selected to compete under the contract. SHIELD, he said, not from the Marvel movies, is simply a tool that I can reach in and use if I need to. One of the most demanding pieces of the program, he said, is the command and control layer that connects sensors, decision makers, and interceptors across services and classification levels. And boy, is that an understatement. All of these things only work if you actually can reach the people who have the launch capability and reach them fast enough and get them to make decisions fast enough. That's the hard part, really. I mean, never mind the technology. Let's say you build technology that works. Let's say it's even 100% effective, and it never is. We had one of those exercises back in my student days, and it was, of course, communications were different then, but if you're also operating in an atmosphere where there are high altitude nuclear explosions going on all the time, communication's kind of rocky. And a lot of times stuff doesn't work if you can't communicate. That's all it really means. Anyway, this the software glue layer, as he calls it, must be demonstrated this summer, integrated with intercepts in 2027, and shown operating against credible threats in 2028 in order to meet their goals. To speed that effort, the Golden Dome office formed a command and control consortium of 6 companies to work side by side, an arrangement Geitlin described as a departure from traditional contracting approaches. Okay, that's not really super necessary to know, but beyond technology, Geitlin says, entrenched culture and organizational behavior pose daily obstacles. He criticized what he described as a compliance-driven mindset that prioritizes risk elimination over speed and integration. We cannot keep doing business as usual. He said that's really what our challenge is going to be. Well, it's happy talk, but okay. While President Trump has floated the idea of international involvement in Golden Dome, Geitlin has said he's not yet been authorized to engage allies. It's also not clear who they might be or whether we have any, I'll add. Everything we are doing is allied by design, he said, adding that planning already assumes future integration of partner capabilities and access to overseas territory for sensors. Oh, well, I think you might need to rethink that one. Golden Dome has figured into a broader geopolitical dispute over Greenland, where Trump has said expanded U.S. access would be vital to the program, including for radar and interceptor deployment. Certainly true. Always been the case. That's why Denmark has always allowed the United States to locate whatever it needs to locate there militarily, but that's not enough, and now it isn't going to work very well. But in addition to all of that, pretty much all of Europe is going to want out of this integration as well, if they ever wanted it in the first place. Okay, just thought I'd put that on the record. More to think about, more context for the big stories that we continue to monitor here on the show. And Greg will be back to help us monitor some of those tomorrow. And of course, Justice Putnam will pick up right where we leave off today and capture a lot of the stories that we might have let fall by the wayside. But this story actually reminded me of something else, more or less totally unrelated, but still something that I set aside because I thought it was insane. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it rapidly enough in Instapaper, so I'll just have to tell you the story off the top of my head. A weirdo story that I don't even know where I found it, but that a vending machine, I know, weird, right? That has showed up in the food court in the Pentagon. That seemed, well, more than a little odd and more than a little problematic. So apparently this is I don't know what else to call it except as the gamers and such will recognize, essentially a loot box vending machine. And apparently there's a word for it too, and I guess the Japanese call it gacha games, not G-O-T-C-H-A as we would spell it, but G-A-C-H-A, but it may have the same root, just be anglicized or Japaneseized pronunciation. But anyway, this thing is essentially a surprise box vending machine. You put, I don't know how and how much you're supposed to pay, but you can get everything from Pokemon cards to rare, normal ones to rare edition ones to like, apparently, I think if I saw the picture correctly and understood it, like, is it a Bryce Harper Nationals jersey, like sports memorabilia, cards, other kinds of prizes. And I guess the idea is some of them are cheap crap and some of them are really super fancy and valuable. And essentially you're just gambling on this machine, which is kind of a stupid machine to begin with, but a stupid machine to say, yeah, we'll take up space in the Pentagon food court with that. Like, why do we want that? But some people making some very interesting points about it, including somebody saying, oh, great, now we're going to have like lieutenant colonels selling state secrets so they can afford to try for a super high-priced, super rare Pokemon card. We don't want that happening. Actually, who's doing any of this purchasing while they're at work at the Pentagon? But a better point was, oh, so this thing, if I understand it correctly,
Radio.com
means what?
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning.
Well, it doesn't mean that, although that something else means that. This was an interesting point. Will this thing be regularly being supplied with sealed mystery boxes being shipped into the Pentagon that nobody's allowed to look inside? Because it spoils the surprise. But P.S., oh no, it's filled with explosives. Hey, that would be a bad idea. Do you think they should reconsider that? Justice does. He's got a show coming up next. We'll see you tomorrow.